December 25th, 1990. Dixon Island, deep in the frozen wasteland of northern Siberia. A group of scientists stands around a device that looks almost insultingly simple. It is not a particle accelerator. It is not a nuclear reactor. It is a sheet of polished aluminum rolled into a tight spiral shape. The clocks on the laboratory wall do not just stop. They begin to run backward. The man inside the machine starts to panic. He sees glowing symbols floating in the freezing air, cuneiform scripts from ancient Sumeria flashing before his eyes like a holographic projection. He feels a presence. He feels the dread of 1,000 years pressing down on his chest. When he finally opens his mouth to scream, the sound that comes out is primal. He isn't screaming because of pain. He is screaming because he looks at his hands. He looks at the walls, and he realizes with absolute terrifying clarity that he is no longer in 1990. To the modern scientific community, this experiment is regarded as pseudoscience, a myth, a ghost story told to frighten undergraduates. But to the man who designed the theory behind that mirror, this was not magic. It was mechanics. His name was Nikolai Kozyrev. And 42 years earlier, in 1948, he sat rotting in a frozen Soviet Gulag cell, waiting to die. While his body froze, his mind unlocked the secret of the universe. He realized that time is not just a measurement. Time is not just a dimension on a graph. Time is a physical beam of energy, like light, like gravity. And if it is energy, it can be harvested. It can be reflected. And most dangerously, it can be focused. Kozyrev believed that if you could build the right shape, you could block out the noise of the present and open a channel to anywhere, or any when. Question: if you could step into a mirror and send a message to your past self, what would you say? Answer in the comments. Today, we are opening the classified files on the torsion fields. We are going back to the frozen hell of 1948 to understand how a prisoner rewrote astrophysics, and we are traveling to the secret labs of 1990, where his disciples tried to break reality. Subscribe to bend reality. Let's enter the mirror. February 1948. The date is stamped on a piece of paper that Nikolai Kozyrev will not see for 10 years. He is currently located in the Dmitrov Central Prison, waiting for transport to the Gulag. The coordinates are 56 degrees north, but geography doesn't matter here. In the Soviet Union of 1948, the Gulag is not a place. It is a state of existence. It is a separate dimension where the only currency is survival and the only certainty is cold. Kozyrev is 39 years old. He was once the brightest star in the Soviet astrophysical sky. He published papers on the atmospheres of the sun and the stars that were read in Paris, London, and New York. But in Stalin's Russia, intelligence is suspicion. To think differently about the stars is to think differently about the state. And so, the genius is stripped of his telescope, stripped of his name, and thrown into a cell designed to break the human mind. The cell is freezing. It is not just the cold of winter. It is the damp, penetrating cold of stone that has never seen the sun. Kozyrev is starving. His body is consuming itself. In this state, the brain usually shuts down. It retreats into hallucination or apathy. But Nikolai Kozyrev's brain does not shut down. It accelerates. Deprived of paper, deprived of pencils, and deprived of books, he retreats into the only laboratory they cannot take away from him, his own mind. He sits in the corner of his cell, wrapping his thin coat around his shivering ribs, and he closes his eyes. He travels. He goes back to the stars. He begins to meditate on a problem that had bothered him for years: the stars, the sun. According to the physics of 1948, according to the laws of thermodynamics accepted by every scientist on Earth, the stars should be burning out. They are giant nuclear furnaces. They burn fuel, and when you burn fuel, you run out. The universe is supposed to be moving towards heat death, entropy, disorder. Everything is supposed to be cooling down, breaking apart, and dying, just like him in this cell. But Kozyrev refuses to accept this. He looks at the universe, even from the darkness of his prison, and he sees life. He sees order. He sees stars that shine for billions of years without exhausting their energy. He asks himself a dangerous question. What if the sun isn't just burning hydrogen? What if the sun is eating something else? He sits there, day after day, while the guards march past, while the other prisoners weep or pray. Kozyrev calculates. He runs the math in the absolute silence of his mind. If the sun was only a nuclear reactor, it would look different. There is a missing variable. There is a missing source of energy that keeps the universe alive. And then, in the silence of 1948, the epiphany strikes him like a physical blow. It is time. Time is not just a duration. It is not just the ticking of a clock on the wall, a clock he hasn't seen in months. Kozyrev realizes that time is a substance. It is a flow. It is a river of energy that pours into every atom of the universe. The stars aren't just burning gas. They are machines that convert the flow of time into light. He calls this causal mechanics. The idea is terrifyingly simple and complex all at once. Cause and effect. We think of them as logic. You drop a glass and it breaks. The drop is the cause, the shatter is the effect. But Kozyrev sees the gap between them. Between the cause and the effect, there is a tiny, infinitesimal moment, a bridge. And in that bridge, energy is released. Time flows from the cause to the effect, and as it flows, it creates a physical force. He realizes that time has density. It can be thick, or it can be thin. When you are happy, time flies. It is thin. When you are in pain, when you are in a cell in 1948 waiting to die, time drags. It is thick. It is heavy. Most people think this is psychological. Just a trick of the mind. Kozyrev realizes it is physical. The density of time actually changes near massive events, near suffering, near gravity, and near human consciousness. He is shivering, but he is no longer cold. He is on fire with the discovery. He realizes that if time is a physical beam, like a ray of light, then it must obey the laws of optics. If time is a beam, it can be blocked. If time is a beam, it can be reflected. And if you can build the right mirror, you can focus time like a laser. This thought keeps him alive. While others die of typhus and exposure, Kozyrev survives on the heat of his own revelation. He isn't in the prison anymore. He is drafting the blueprints for a machine that won't be built for another 40 years. He imagines a shape, a spiral, a shape that mimics the DNA of life, the swirl of a galaxy, the shell of a snail. He theorizes that if he could curl aluminum, a metal that doesn't interact with magnetism the way iron does, into a specific spiral, he could create a shield against the flow of time. Inside that shield, the noise of the universe would stop. The relentless push of the present moment would dissolve. And a human being sitting inside that silence would be able to hear the past and the future as clearly as a radio broadcast. Kozyrev survives the Gulag. He survives the winter of 1948. He survives the death of Stalin. He carries this secret like a burning coal in his chest. He eventually gets out. He returns to science. But he knows he can never fully explain what he saw in the darkness of the cell. The Soviet Academy of Sciences calls him brilliant but eccentric. They let him study the moon. They let him study volcanoes. But in the shadows, he begins to write down the true physics. He whispers it to his students. He draws the spiral on chalkboards and erases it before the administration walks in. He plants the seeds. He dies in 1983. He never builds the machine. He never sees the mirror. But ideas are harder to kill than men. His students kept the notebooks. They kept the math. And in 1990, just as the Soviet Union was collapsing, Just as the chaos of the world was reaching a peak, they decided it was time. They traveled to the far north, to the place where the Earth's magnetic field is weakest, to finish what the prisoner of 1948 started. They bought the aluminum. They rolled the sheets. They built the spiral. They were ready to test the Kozyrev Mirror. But they forgot one thing. Kozyrev developed this theory while he was surrounded by suffering, by death, and by the extreme mental pressure of the Gulag. The theory was born in darkness. And when you build a machine based on a theory born in darkness, you should not be surprised if it opens a door to something dark. The scientists of 1990 are about to turn the key, and the prisoner of 1948 is no longer there to warn them about what is on the other side. The year is 1989. Nikolai Kozyrev has been dead for 6 years. The Soviet Union is fracturing, the Iron Curtain is rusting, but deep within the Siberian branch of the Russian Academy of Medical Sciences, the work has not stopped. In fact, without the heavy hand of Moscow watching every move, the research has accelerated. 2 men pick up the torch that Kozyrev dropped. Their names are Nikolai Kozyrev and Alexander Trofimov. They are not fringe theorists. They are respected, high-level scientists. Kozyrev is a member of the Academy. Trofimov is a brilliant medical researcher. They have Kozyrev's notebooks. They have the math. And unlike the prisoner of 1948, they have the resources to build the device. They choose a location that is as unforgiving as the Gulag, where the idea was born, Dixon Island. If you look at a map, Dixon is barely on it. It is a settlement on the edge of the Arctic Ocean, one of the northernmost inhabited places on Earth. It is dark for half the year. It is brutally cold. But the scientists didn't choose it for the isolation. They chose it for the latitude. At 73 degrees north, the Earth's electromagnetic shield is thin. The magnetosphere, the bubble that protects us from solar radiation, dips down at the poles. The veil between the Earth and the cosmos is thinnest here. If you are going to try to poke a hole in the fabric of time, you don't do it at the equator. You do it at the crown of the world. The device they construct is technically known as a hypomagnetic chamber, but the team just calls it the mirror. It is surprisingly low-tech in appearance. It consists of large sheets of aluminum alloy. They choose aluminum specifically. Iron is magnetic. It holds onto fields. Aluminum is paramagnetic. It doesn't hold a charge, but it interacts with magnetic fields in a unique way. They roll the aluminum sheets into a spiral. It isn't a closed cylinder. It is a coil, like a snail shell, winding clockwise. The geometry is precise. It is based on the golden ratio, 1.618. The spiral makes 1.5 turns. The theory is that the shape matters more than the material. Kozyrev believed that the shape of a spiral acts like a lens for time energy. Just as a concave mirror focuses light to a burning point, the aluminum spiral focuses the flow of time, or, more accurately, it blocks it. Kozyrev's math suggested that the flow of time is carried by the electromagnetic field of the planet. We are constantly swimming in a river of time that pushes us from the past to the future. It's unavoidable. It's global. But inside the spiral, the math said the river should stop. The aluminum walls would shield the occupant from the Earth's magnetic field. The noise of the planet would be silenced. Inside the mirror, the magnetic field drops to almost zero. It becomes a null zone, a place where now does not exist. As the technicians assembled the mirrors in the lab, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. This is where the official reports get strange. Before a single human subject stepped inside, the machine began to exhibit behavior. The researchers reported a phenomenon they called the mirror fear. It was a sudden, irrational wave of panic that would hit anyone who walked close to the opening of the spiral. It wasn't just nervousness. It was a primal, biological alarm. The same feeling an animal gets before an earthquake. The air around the mirrors began to taste metallic. Ozone, the smell of a thunderstorm, even though they were indoors. Then came the visual anomalies. On several occasions, the researchers saw balls of glowing energy, plasmoids, materialize inside the lab. These weren't reflections. These were free-floating orbs of light that would hover near the mirrors and then vanish. In one documented instance, a disk of light appeared and moved around the laboratory ceiling before disappearing through the wall. But the strangest report didn't come from inside the lab. It came from the outside. On the night they activated the experimental protocols, the staff at the weather station on Dixon Island noticed something hovering above the laboratory building. It was a glowing geometric object, a disk with a tail. It hovered in the freezing Arctic air, completely silent, directly above the roof where the mirrors were housed. This wasn't just a localized sighting. The object was distinct enough that it was logged in the station's journals. It was as if the mirrors were acting like a beacon. By creating a zone of zero time on the surface of the Earth, they had lit a flare in the dark. Someone or something was watching. Inside the lab, the equipment began to malfunction. Electronic watches stopped. Compasses spun wildly, unable to find north because, inside the spiral, north didn't exist. Kaznechev and Trofimov knew they were crossing a line. They were creating a space where the standard laws of physics, the laws that keep us sane, were being suspended. They had built a dam in the river of time. The pressure was building up behind the dam. The logical thing to do would be to shut it down, to dismantle the aluminum sheets and go back to Moscow. The fear was palpable. The mirror fear was pushing them away, warning them that human biology was not meant to enter a zero-time state. But curiosity is a stronger force than fear. Kozyrev had spent years in a freezing cell dreaming of this moment. He had unlocked the math. He had predicted the spiral. The machine was ready. The null zone was active. All they needed now was a test subject. They needed a human consciousness to step into the spiral, sit down in the chair, and close their eyes. They needed to know, when you disconnect a human being from the flow of time, what happens to their mind? Do they go crazy? Do they die? Or do they go somewhere else? It is December 1990. The scientist holding the clipboard looks at the volunteer. The volunteer nods. He steps past the threshold of the aluminum coil. He sits in the chair. The air is heavy. The silence is absolute. He is about to find out that the mirror isn't just a shield. It is a window. And the window is opening. The subject is seated. The protocol begins. In a standard scientific experiment, you have a control group and a variable. You have a sterile environment, but inside the Kozyrev mirror, there is no such thing as a sterile environment. The moment the subject settles into the chair, the variables become infinite. The first thing the subjects report is not visual. It is physical. They report a sensation of vertigo, a feeling like falling backwards in a chair but never hitting the ground. The inner ear, the biological mechanism that tells us where we are in space, begins to fail. Without the Earth's magnetic reference point, the human body forgets which way is up. Then comes the silence. It is not just the absence of sound. It is the absence of pressure. The subjects describe a feeling as if the weight of the atmosphere has vanished. They are floating in a void. The lead researcher, Alexander Trofimov, initiates the primary objective. This is not just an isolation test. This is a transmission test. The goal is audacious, to prove that inside this null time zone, human consciousness can access a global information field. They believe that thoughts are not trapped in the skull. They believe thoughts travel on the same time-energy waves that Kozyrev discovered in 1948. The experiment is set up across thousands of miles. The transmitter is inside the mirror on Dixon Island. The receivers are other scientists located in Novosibirsk, thousands of kilometers to the south. The protocol involves a computer randomly selecting a series of symbols. These are not random shapes. They use ancient symbols, Sumerian cuneiform, Egyptian glyphs, and complex geometric structures. They choose these because they believe these ancient shapes resonate with the human subconscious. The computer in Novosibirsk selects a symbol. The person inside the mirror in Dixon is supposed to see it and draw it. But this is where the timeline breaks. According to the official logs of the experiment, a statistical impossibility occurs. The subject inside the mirror picks up the pencil. His hand moves automatically, almost possessed. He sketches a symbol on the notepad. It is a specific Sumerian glyph. He draws it at 10 a.m. In Novosibirsk, the computer doesn't select that symbol until 10:05 a.m. Read that again. The effect happened before the cause. In the standard model of physics, this is impossible. It violates the law of causality. The glass cannot break before you drop it. The bullet cannot hit the target before you pull the trigger. But Kozyrev had predicted exactly this in the Gulag. He said that time is not a one-way street. He said that the future is already casting a shadow back onto the present. Inside the mirror, the subject had stepped out of the linear flow. He was standing on a mountain looking down at the river. He could see the boat that had already passed and the boat that was coming around the bend at the same time. He received the information 5 minutes from the future. But for the man inside the aluminum coil, the success of the experiment is the least of his worries, because the symbols are not stopping. The subjects begin to report that the mirror is dissolving. The aluminum sheets disappear. The laboratory disappears. They are no longer in a cold room in Siberia. They begin to see their own lives, but not as a memory. They are reliving it. One subject describes being back in his childhood home. He can smell the soup his mother is cooking. He can feel the texture of the wooden floor. It is hyper-real. He isn't remembering it. He is there. Then the scene shifts. He sees himself as an old man. He sees his own death. He sees wars that haven't happened yet. He sees flashes of cities burning, of technologies that don't exist. The time. Energy that Kozyrev theorized is flooding into their brains without a filter. The human brain is designed to filter time. It is designed to keep us locked in the now so we can hunt, eat, and survive. The mirror tears that filter away. And then the entities appear. This is the part of the report that usually gets redacted. This is the part that makes conventional scientists uncomfortable. Multiple subjects, independently of each other, report sensing a presence inside the mirror. They describe it as a watcher, a cold, observing intelligence. Some see it as a ball of light. Others see it as a humanoid figure made of static. They feel that they are being studied. Remember the Sumerian symbols? As the subjects focus on these ancient glyphs, they report a terrifying sensation that the symbols are not just drawings, they are keys. By focusing on the symbols inside the zero field, they claim they unlocked a door. They report visions of a civilization that is not human. They describe tall, transparent towers. They describe a sky with 2 suns. The panic sets in. The mirror fear spikes. The heart rates of the subjects go up to 140, 150 beats per minute. They are sitting perfectly still, but their bodies are in a fight-or-flight response. They scream to be let out. When the researchers rush in and pull the subjects out of the spiral, the transition is violent. It's like a diver coming up too fast from the deep ocean. The bends. The subjects fall to the floor, vomiting, weeping. They look at the clocks on the wall with confusion. They have been inside for 20 minutes, but they swear they were gone for days. They check their watches. Their mechanical watches have stopped. But the most chilling part of the experiment wasn't the hallucinations. It was the physical evidence. After the experiments, the researchers analyzed the area around the mirrors. They found that the ozone levels in the room had spiked to toxic levels. They found that the viscosity of water inside the lab had changed. The mirror hadn't just messed with the subjects' heads, it had altered the physical reality of the room. Kozyrev was right. In 1948, freezing in his cell, he had realized that time is a physical substance. And in 1990, his students proved that if you concentrate that substance, you can warp reality. They had proved that the past, present, and future are all happening at once, stacked on top of each other like pages in a book. and the mirror was a hole drilled through the book. But the question remained. If you drill a hole through the book of time, who is looking through it from the other side? The experiment was a success. The theory was proven, but the price was too high. The subjects were psychologically scarred. The phenomena around the lab, the UFOs, the dread, the malfunctioning equipment, were getting worse. The scientists realized they had built an antenna, and it was broadcasting a signal loud and clear. They didn't know who was listening, so they did the only thing they could do. They stopped, or at least that's what they told the public. The laboratory on Dixon Island sits silent today. The wind from the Arctic Ocean howls through the cracks in the walls, burying the facility in snow. If you went there now, you might find the rusted remains of aluminum sheets. You might find the empty chairs, where men sat and screamed at the sight of their own futures. Officially, the experiment stopped in the late 1990s. The Russian Academy of Medical Sciences cited lack of funding. They claimed the results, while intriguing, were too erratic to be useful. The Soviet Union had collapsed, and in the chaos of the new Russia, there was no money for time machines. But there is another version of the story. A version whispered by the researchers who were there. They didn't stop because the money ran out. They stopped because the results were becoming dangerous. The mirror fear wasn't just affecting the people inside the spiral. It was beginning to bleed out into the facility. The researchers started having nightmares. They started feeling the presence even when they were miles away from the lab. The hole they had drilled in the book of time was getting bigger, and they didn't know how to close it. They realized that Nikolai Kozyrev, the genius prisoner of 1948, had left out a warning. In his frozen cell, he had discovered the door, but he never told anyone what was waiting in the hallway. So they shut it down. They packed up the files. They dismantled the spirals. But here is the most terrifying part of this story. If this were a story about a nuclear bomb, you would be safe. You cannot build a nuclear bomb in your garage. You cannot buy enriched uranium at the hardware store. But the Kozyrev Mirror? It is just aluminum. It is a specific alloy, yes. It requires a specific thickness. It requires the geometry of the golden ratio, the spiral of life. But it is just metal and math. The blueprints are not locked in a vault in the Kremlin. They are on the internet, right now. You can download the schematics of the spiral. You can buy the aluminum sheets. You can build a device in your basement that disconnects you from the flow of time. There are forums online where people claim to have done it. They call themselves chrononauts. They share instructions on how to build DIY mirrors. Some report nothing but a headache. Some report the buzzing sound. And some stop posting altogether. Nikolai Kozyrev died without ever seeing his machine. He died believing that one day humanity would master time. He believed that we would use this energy to travel to the stars instantly, bypassing the speed of light. He saw a future where we were no longer prisoners of the now. He was a man who looked at a prison wall and saw a window. But before you rush out to buy aluminum, before you decide to build your own spiral to see the future or talk to the past, ask yourself one question. Why did the scientists who dedicated their lives to this, the men who had the full backing of the Soviet machine, why did they walk away? Maybe they realized that time is a prison for a reason. Maybe the walls of the now are there to protect us. Maybe we are not meant to see the page before we turn it. Kozyrev escaped the Gulag by traveling into his mind. But if you build the mirror and you step inside and the clocks stop, you might find that you haven't escaped. You might find that you have just entered a much larger, much darker cell. And you might not be alone in there. We have uploaded the schematics of the Kozyrev spiral to our community tab for educational purposes only. Do not build it. But if you want to explore more forbidden science, if you want to unlock the files that history tried to burn, you know what to do. Click that button. Turn on notifications. I'll see you in the future. Or maybe I already have.